This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 221.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. Today, my guest, you already know. I hope you already know. If you don't know, then you should know. And his name is John Kerr, the author of Master in Technical Sales, The Trusted Advisor, and the Sales Engineer Manager Handbook. He's on the show again because he just updated the third edition of Master in Technical Sales to the fourth edition, and it's been like 8 years since the two. And that was the topic of conversation. What has happened in the last 8 years? Oh, and by the way, I am your host, Ramsey Majaba, in case you guys don't know or you're new here. If you are new, welcome. If you're not new, welcome back. So yeah, I have this chat with John. We talk about a lot of different things, as we usually do on these shows. And I'm bringing up my notes. We talk about value selling, business discovery. I did poke the bear once. You'll understand that during the show. Compensation, interaction with salespeople. So these are some of the topics that we covered today, and I would invite you to check them out. So let's just jump into the show. Good afternoon, Mr. Kerr. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderfully well. I'm hanging out here in beautiful Longboat Key, Florida on a warm and sunny day. So how could it get any better?
Well, by talking to me, I guess.
Well, oh, of course. Yes.
I don't know if that's better. My wife would disagree with that statement. So hopefully it'll remain the same. At least it'll remain the same by the time we're done. So we were just talking. You were asking me which episode you were on. I think you were on episode 18. I still don't understand why you came on the show. I just mentioned that before. You didn't answer. I don't know if there's an answer, but I'm happy you did, and I'm happy you're back now. So you've been on like 3 times or 4 times so far.
Yeah, I think so. One of the unwritten things we have within my company is that we do whatever we can to promote the profession of pre-sales engineering. So pretty much whenever somebody kind of starts a new blog or a podcast, like yours, we try and help. And look at you now. I mean, you're 200 episodes in. You've been doing this for 4 years. So I think it was a pretty good decision, right?
I hope so. You, like, when you first came on, you kind of you were advertising the role for maybe 3 people. Right now, it's a little bit more. So,
well, that's great. Well, listen, I also have to say on behalf of the sales engineering community, thank you for the job that you do. You are part of my exercise routine. I listen to your podcast every week when I'm trying to get some exercise, walking the beaches down here, trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. So thank you for all that you do.
It is my pleasure. Doing this has been the highlight of my career. So it's been fun doing this because I get to talk to people like yourself and Peter Cohen and Chris White and a lot of other people who actually are sales engineers still, like from intermediate, from beginners all the way to VPs. So thank you for being part of the SE community. So I wanted to ask you, you keep writing books, or refreshing books, updating books. I mean, sales engineering is such a static role that nothing has changed. So why would you write the 4th edition of your new book?
Oh, man. Well, someone has to kind of generate the royalties so I can pay for this lifestyle down here in Florida. No, there's so much going on. I mean, I wrote the original Mastering Technical Sales book over 20 years ago now, believe it or not, the first edition, mainly out of pure frustration. I'm sure I've told this story before, in that I was an SE director and I couldn't find anybody who could train my people. We had to sit in the back of the room and go through solution selling for the 5th time in our lives. And like, what a waste of time that was. So when someone who worked for me looked at me and said, if you're so damn smart, why don't you write a book about it? And so together with Aaron Bowling, my co-author at the time, we slunk out to a local bar and scoped out the book and took it from there. And the rest is history. Who knew? I had no idea writing that book over 20 years ago, it would morph into now a truly global multi-million-dollar business that we have. And we touch the lives of, literally hundreds of thousands of people doing this job. I mean, who knew? It's humbling and amazing. It's fantastic.
How long did it take you to write that book? Because it's not a small book.
No, no, it's not. So the original book took Aaron and myself around about a year. There you go. So you've got the third edition there. If you want a visual, this is the fourth edition, right? Oh. So we'll get to that in a minute.
I have it signed by someone. I'm not sure who.
Yeah. Hey, look at that. Awesome. Yeah, that'll be worth a lot of money, maybe someday.
It's priceless. It's priceless to me.
It's priceless. There you go. Yeah, so it took us about a year to write the book, and actually this fourth edition, which we'll get to in a sec, that took about the same amount of time. It was actually a complete rewrite. So Aaron Bowling, my co-author, is no longer in the business, so he kind of like bowed out of this project. So it's blood, sweat, a whole lot of love and tears, and 160,000 words. So it does take a while.
So things obviously have changed enough in 20 years that you would actually have to do a rewrite. But it's been 8 years since that third edition.
Yeah.
I guess this is gonna be a general question that you might be able to answer in like 5 hours. What has changed?
What has changed? Yeah.
Why would you write a fourth edition?
While I'm watching that, let me flip it back at you. I mean, Ramsey, you've been doing this podcast now for 4 years. Think about all the things that have changed since episode 1 when you've been doing it. I mean, it's scary, right? I mean, just think about some of the major topics since 2014. There's been a cloudification, right? So everything's as a service. The whole buying and consumption model. So the days of massive, great big enterprise license agreements and annual 22% maintenance, they've got the Oracles of the world going, like that's history now, that's past. So that means the way you sell and the way you buy, well, it's mostly past. Not everyone does that. Not at your company. All right. We've got the advent of value engineering. We've got a whole new tech stack that's available to sales engineers. I mean, there's like over 40 companies now that manufacture technology to make the SE's job easier. The job's getting automated. The way we get compensated has changed. The way we interact with our salespeople and our partners has changed a little bit. So, I mean, there's just been tremendous changes, both, professionally and technically and on the business side in those 8 years. It was absolutely time to, update it.
So, all right, you mentioned a lot of things that have changed. I'm going to pick a couple and we can discuss those. Sure. You mentioned value selling. Has that changed, or have we just put a name to something that a lot of people have been doing? They just didn't know that's what it was called.
Value selling / solution selling has been around since the mid to late 80s, right? Yep. I mean, if I look back at some of the things that we teach in our business value discovery class, the genesis of that dates back to Oracle in the late 80s and me at Sybase in the early 1990s. So now I think we put a really nice framework around it. We christened it value engineering. And it's not necessarily that we're asking SEs now to do ROI calculations and complex TCOs or anything else. I mean, it's really about time to value, and is it worthwhile the customer even purchasing part of your portfolio to solve some problem or to achieve some dream. So I think it helps in qualification as well, and that's somewhat new. I think the other trend is that it's probably something that SCs didn't touch 20 years ago. But now, given the far more consultative nature of the job, I think every SC needs to know how to do business value discovery and deliver that business value engineering, because the sales rep isn't always going to be around. Right? So it is now a necessary and required skill, unless you're a deeply technical subject matter expert.
Well, okay, so I work. My industry is kind of still old school, like networking and test and measurement and that sort of thing. And when I look at some of the sales engineers that I work with, they're so intelligent from a technical perspective. They know everything about the product, but they don't really work on the business side. They have zero, once it's business side, they just shut down. No, I'm not being a part of it. But that's kind of the skills that we need to work on right now as sales engineers. If someone is deeply technical, someone is old school, how can they manage to shift their thinking a little bit and start talking about business a little bit more? Or do they have it? Can they just keep doing what they're doing?
I think they have to change. So the self-serving answer is they should read chapters 5 through 8 of the new book, right? And that's and that's where it covered. Sorry, I had to throw that in.
It's good.
But if you think about it, I mean, there's many components to sales now, and we still seem to have this fanatical focus on the demo in the world of sales engineering. And it's important, but I think it pigeonholes us in a certain area. And being able to do all the other things before and after the demo, I think really round out the role of a sales engineer. And the example I cite is, again, discovery. Right? So every SE is great at technical discovery, but not all of them are so good at business discovery, which is, what's the time, money, people implications of your tech if it gets bought. And it's like the double strands of DNA. I mean, they twine together. And you can't just do one without the other. So if you're deeply technical and you don't cover the business side, well, when you get to do your demo, your presentation, how do you know what target to aim at? So discovery is about painting the target and figuring out then what are the features, advantages of your portfolio that you're going to show the customer to prove that you can get rid of their pains and help them achieve their gains. Otherwise, you are either relying 100% on the rep to give you that information, which is rarely accurate, or you're guessing, both of which are crimes, right?
Well, this is something that my industry, we face. What's the business value of testing? Well, it's obvious. They need to test to make sure that they don't find bugs.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk to SEs in my industry, and it could be for other industries as well, there's your business driver. But they never dig deeper enough to say why they would buy one solution over another solution. What they want to test, sure, everybody. Sure. But so is it speed that's interesting for them? Is it ease of use? We need to dig in deeper, and that's the part that I find hard.
It is. Well, so let me tell you a little CIO story back from way back when I was in one of my other lives. So I needed to go out and buy programmer productivity software, which also handled testing as well. So we did the usual thing, right? We put together an RFP, we sent it out to the top 5 vendors. We give them a week to respond because that's what customers do. Some business development rep panics, throws it over the wall to the SE. The SE answers yes to everything, right? So RFP is really fast paperwork, and wham, responses come back. So the next week we set up 5 half days for the vendors to come in, and arrive they come. Now, Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning. So by the time we get to, just after the final presentation, my rear end is numb, my brain is numb. I can barely differentiate between the 5 vendors, except one of them was smart enough to do some additional discovery with my permission over and above what the others did. So they got to talk to my chief of staff and a couple of my development engineers and my QA manager. And what they discovered was that my company was coming out with a brand new product. And when we did the critical path analysis, IT was on the critical path development, and we were going to delay the release of the product by 8 weeks, right, which is going to cost my company $8 million. Right? So there's a business driver right there. Plus, every time I walked into the boardroom, everyone pointed their fingers at me, right? Because I was the idiot who's going to delay the release of the product, which was not a fun place for me to be. So the one thing the vendor did differently is one of them, every time they went tappy, tappy, tap and showed a feature, then the SE, she got up, went to the whiteboard, sketched something out and said, and John, that's how you're going to knock 6 days off your development cycle. Tappy, 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 tap, showed me some other feature. And John, that's how we'll take 5 days out of your QA cycle. And by the end of their demo, how much time do you think they'd saved in my development cycle?
Hopefully 6 weeks.
Yeah, it was like 6 or 7 weeks out of the 8 weeks. So when we scored the 5 vendors, and here's the critical thing, they came second. Right? Vendor number 1 scored 74 points. I still remember it now because they had more features and functionality. Vendor number 2, who did the best job of matching their tech to my business problem, scored 70. Okay? So I made the CIO decision that we were going to go with vendor number 2 because they understood my business and I was convinced they would help me fix my problem. So the vendor that came second won a $550,000 deal. Now, were my analysts upset because we didn't buy the product that had more bells and whistles? Well, yeah, but that's why they're analysts and I'm the CIO. Was the rep of company number one that scored 74 points a little peeved because he didn't get the business? Yeah, he was. So company number two, the company that came second but did the best job of matching their technology to my business problem and convincing me I could solve it, got the business. Plus, I could then walk into the boardroom, look at the lady who ran marketing, and she was now the critical path and not me. So personal risk as well. That is solution selling and value engineering at its best. And that was done, 20 years ago.
Well, the question that pops in mind, like you mentioned in the demo, she was mentioning like, oh, you're going to save this amount of time. How is it that she's the only one who found out that business problem out of all the other 5 vendors? What did she do differently to find that?
She had a kind of, she sat down, she talked to people, and just had them describe what they do over the course of the day and figured out where they were, quote, losing time. Invested a little bit extra of her time to gather that information, and the other ones didn't.
So that's the big thing. It's just asking questions. I've noticed some SEs, I don't want to say a lot, at least in my industry, they show up and they're just there to answer questions. And it never occurs to them to ask why a customer is asking a specific question. Like, how fast is your automation, for example? Well, it's fast. But why are they asking that? Are they seeing problems somewhere else? Why is it a driver right now? And if we can ask that question, it took me a while to understand that, because it took me like a year and a half to figure out, oh, my customer is going with me because I'm faster at automation. And no one's ever said that to me. And I never discovered it until like I really got to know the customer. And that's where I was able to like relay that to our product management, because they were starting to do things that will affect that. So that's how we maintain the business. But these are the parts that we need to discover. That's just not the obvious.
Yeah.
Everyone wants virtualization, but what is the problem with that?
What does it mean? So the whole concept of, quote, solution selling, value engineering has been around for decades. I think it's now coming more into the mainstream of sales engineers. And I talk to many CROs and VPs of sales around the world, and I asked them to describe their SE team. They say, my SEs are great technically, but, and what comes off the but is, this first time they get a little bit of pushback, they just retreat into the technical weeds and talk about features, and they never link it back to the advantages and the benefits of our portfolio. And if you make that a habit as a sales engineer, like, gosh, everything else follows. I mean, I think it's like the number one thing you need to do.
I mean, you might be great technically, but if you don't know how to ask a single question, you'll never know, you won't know the answer. I have an example where a customer of mine sent out an email to myself and a fellow SE that I was working with. And they asked, hey, guys, do you support this feature? And my colleague immediately answered, no, we do not support it. My response is, why are you looking for that feature? Oh, because we need to do this. Oh, well, we have this other product that we can provide that does all these things that
Yes.
you're mentioning. And we went from a no to a 300K deal just by asking one question. Obviously, there were more questions involved.
Yeah. That's a perfect example, Ramsey. And I used to tell my managers that you can judge the quality of an SE and a rep by the questions that they ask, not necessarily the answers that they give.
Yeah.
Right. And especially in a discovery session, the best discovery session is where you ask a question, then you shut up and listen really, really hard.
No.
Right?
No. By the way, so you mentioned really fast RFP equals really fast paperwork. I'm going to steal that from now on. You also mentioned SEs need to be involved in what's before and after the demo. We've already covered before, which is discovery, along with other things. But what's after the demo? Generally speaking, we're done. We do the demo, we walk away, we killed it, we got the technical win, if that exists, and now we're done.
All right. Well, now you're poking the bear, right? Because you know what I think about technical wins. So those of you just listening to this, Ramsey has an evil grin on his face right now. So there's so much after the demo because you as the SE are responsible for the relationship with that customer just as much as the account exec is, if not more. because we all know they'll tell you as the SE stuff they would never ever tell a salesperson, right? I mean, it's like the hidden advantage that we have. So I think the old days when the SE and the SE team would deal with the techies and maybe first line technical management, and the account exec and sales management say, okay, we'll handle everyone else, right? We'll talk to the execs, we'll talk to line of business, we'll talk to the directors and the CIOs. Like, that's gone. I mean, that is so 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Now it's whoever's got the best relationship and can satisfy the customer and make them happy. So it's not unusual to see, a 27-year-old SE in front of a 55-year-old, CIO or line of business person, having a deep conversation with them if they're the best two people to have that conversation to, move the relationship and the transaction forward. Now, that's a Western view, right? I mean, in many parts of the world, titles and everything else matters. But I think that dissolution of the titles and bureaucracy and everything, that's only going to accelerate as we go forward. So SEs do need to handle the relationship. Part two of what you asked me, right, the technical win. So the technical win is now baked into some sales processes. A number of the big cloud vendors have technical win as the exit for whatever stage 2 or stage 3. So my concept is, yeah, you're kind of responsible for the technical win if you actually know how to measure it. It's a very difficult thing to measure. Secondly, no one gets paid on the technical win, right? Show me a compensation plan where someone gets paid on the technical win, right? As my Scottish buddy says, it didn't exist, right? It's not there. So you have to drive it forward to the business win. And yes, the account exec might be a little more responsible for doing that than you, but you can't just say, I get a great demo, and then you disengage and wait for the PO to arrive.
It's interesting because I can't even define a technical win, right? Like, there is no absolute definition. A lot of people say the technical win is when you've answered all the technical questions. Great. I've answered all the technical questions. Did I show the value of anything? Do I have to show the value to get the technical win? Or is it just checkbox and say I answered all the technical questions? That's the part that confuses me about it. I agree with you basically about the technical.
Yeah, it is hard to. Now, a few of my clients have done it. I mean, they've got fairly strict criteria as to what a technical win means. They have it baked into their Salesforce instance, but then they did analytics afterwards. And what they've discovered is, like one of my clients, that the technical win foreshadows the business win by 42 days in their instance. So if you get a technical win now, then if you get the business win, it's likely to happen 42 days from now. And there is an 81% chance it will happen.
Okay.
And 19% of time, technical win does not translate into a business win. So that actually helps them forecast. And the VP of sales engineering can actually give a more accurate forecast because of the law of large numbers than the VP of sales can. So it does have utility, but yeah, it's an internal metric. It's not a metric that the SE organization can beat the sales force up with, because tech win rate is always higher than the business win rate everywhere. Yeah, it's a stage, but you can't stop at it.
Yeah. So if it's defined properly, it could be used as an indication. If it's not defined properly, it might be useless, completely useless to an organization, and just like actually negatively affect sales process potential.
Absolutely. So that's one thing that hasn't changed over 30 years, is the concept that SEs are responsible for the technical win. What has changed recently is doing something about looking deeper at the technical win and figuring out how to make it a useful predictive metric.
Yeah, I'd be curious to talk to those who implemented it and successfully, because I would love to know what their definition is. Because again, the definition that I hear the most is I've answered all the technical questions, and that's it. And for me, I don't have exact numbers, but it doesn't seem enough, because again, people cannot answer technical questions and not show value in any of it.
Yeah, that's an insufficient definition, because the client also then has to say that you are the best, quote, solution, whatever, for them, and then take some positive actions to demonstrate that internally. So you can't just answer questions.
Yeah, I like that. Another thing you mentioned is some of the things that changed is compensation. So like I've only been with a couple of companies, and
Mhm.
I had to negotiate my own compensation because of my weird position in one of them. But what have you seen in terms of compensation that's changed 8 years or 20 years?
Yeah. So compensation is kind of like blown hot and cold within the SE industry. And actually, in the very first edition of the book, we had a chapter on compensation. Then we took it out, and now I put one back in the fourth edition. And strangely enough, it's one of the longest chapters in the book, which kind of says something. So the traditional SE plan is that you have a base salary. Then on top of that, you have a bonus/commission structure, which is directly tied towards sales. You might get paid on two numbers, right? You might get paid on a local number, and on a a regional or a national number. There could be MBOs floating on top of that. Then you've got stock incentives, and then all the usual HR stuff, and that's the classic plan. What complicates things now is the whole consumption model. Because that old plan worked great when a company gave you £3 million, euros, dollars, whatever, and boom, it was done, it was booked, and then you got 22% maintenance forever after until it came time to renew the deal. Now though, you're paid on the consumption model, where someone worked with an Amazon, Google Cloud, VMware, whoever it is, and they purchased X amount of utility for which they pay for over the course of the month. It's now the job of the sales engineer not just to make sure that happens, but also to make sure that it ramps up from whatever the flatline version of it was, and if possible, you get time to value both for the customer, so they get utility of their spend, and you as the vendor get time to value because you get the customer up and running faster. So that kind of model is now getting baked into compensation plans. And some of the things that maybe 5 or 10 years ago, customer success managers or technical account managers were paid for in terms of uptake of technology, that's now falling over onto the SE side as well, which is kind of cool.
You mentioned MBOs. For those who don't know what that means, you might just
So MBO is management by objective. So that is when you are given hopefully just 2 or 3 objectives for a quarter. It might be to build a new demo. It could be to gather competitive intelligence and write a playbook. It could be to create 3 reference stories. Any of those are MBOs, and usually they go towards creating better infrastructure for the SE or the sales team in general, and you get paid to do those. They're also useful at smoothing out compensation models. Some startups use them, some larger companies use them, but they're kind of falling out of favor a bit. So.
You also mentioned customer success and TAMs and SEs, and things are shifting between them. So in the past, I remember, at least in my industry, SE sells, SE supports. Some other industries, SE sells, TAM supports, or customer success supports. Now you're seeing there's a kind of a blend between the two. Is there the delineation of the role? Is it changing, or is it the same? What are you seeing there?
I think every company draws the line somewhere differently, if they even draw the line. To do a little thought experiment, if you think about the old generic name for our role, which is pre-sales. And again, in the old enterprise license model of 10, 20 years ago, yeah, you had pre-sales, you got the big transaction, and then you kind of threw it over the fence to professional services and tech support, and maybe a customer success manager deal was big enough. And as an SE, you and the rep just kind of like put your hands, and you didn't go back to that client to 3 years later. Now you are competing for their business every month, and you're competing for more of their business every month. So the barrier to entry is lower, the barrier to exit is lower. So you are in pre-sales and post-sales and current sales all the time, because unless you're dealing with a tiny company in the small to medium business area, there's always a next deal and a next transaction or a next ramp up of a project that's staring you right in the face that you have to focus on. So the lines have gotten blurred tremendously in the last 4 or 5 years, particularly.
Something else I've noticed, at least it's happened to me in terms of compensation, the way the commission is paid out is different. It used to be for 1% of quota, you get paid 1% of commission. now they're kind of saying, oh, until you hit 60%, we're not paying you anything, and then we'll pay you everything after the second 60%, or quarterly quotas or half yearly quotas. Is that something that has been, maybe I'm kind of
yeah, that's always been around, and that no disrespect to some people I know on the financial side, is like cheap CFOs looking for ways to put a ceiling under the compensation. My advice would be, it's a super hot job market out there. As an SE, you always want to look at the compensation plan before you join. And if there are floors or ceilings on your plan, you don't get paid unless you make 60% of quota, or if you make more than 150% of quota, you don't get accelerators. It just gets capped. Like, that's a useless plan. I mean, that's just someone being cheap. You should get you eat what you kill, right? So.
Yeah, like I've worked with companies where they tell me, oh, if you go after 150% of quota, we stop making, that's where we start losing money paying you. So we're going to like reduce the accelerator. It's like, yeah, but that's how I make my money.
Yeah, yeah, and they actually don't make money, because the incremental profitability they gain from that like far outweighs any additional compensation that they plan. And if you tie a CFO down and torture them, they'll admit that.
And one of the other
but by the way, I'm not proposing that you tie your CFO down and torture him or her.
I always take you literally, John. So I was gonna go do it, but too bad he's in Santa Rosa and I'm in Canada, so I won't be able to make it. One of the other things you mentioned is interaction with our salespeople. That's changed. How do you see that has changed since 20 years?
So that is one of the aspects I think has changed for the positive. Much as we like to make fun of our sales counterparts and call them coin operated and anything else, I mean, everybody listening to this podcast, unless they're brand new, has probably had the privilege of working with an absolutely amazing and excellent account exec. They absolutely know what they're doing, and the relationship between an SE and a rep can be truly multiplicative. And I mean, again, think about to when I was an IT exec. If I had a rep and SE in my office, I mean, you could tell if they were a professional team. And in terms of building trust and credibility, I mean, you can figure that out within the first 10 minutes. They work together, they almost finish each other's sentences. They're almost like a married couple. And there's a lot of professionalism there. So that's what you need to see. So if you're an SE and you're blessed with working with one rep or maybe just a couple of reps, the relationship that you build, and the verbal and nonverbal communications that you have when you're interacting with a client are critical. And those professional skills are just as critical as being able to do a great demo or an amazing whiteboard or interact with an executive.
So you mentioned this is changing to the better. I've noticed like a lot of newer companies don't have that one-to-one or one-to-two thing. It's more pool model, and whoever, you don't get to build that relationship with the account manager anymore, or the customers, because you may not have the same customer twice depending on the company you work for. Are you seeing that as well in other companies, or like, is it just something I'm seeing? Or
it goes in waves. So I personally am not a big fan of the pool model because I think there's a lot to be said for stability. So stability of the relationship with the AE and stability of the relationship with the customer. And there's a number of trends that drive that. So typically the average time that an SE has been in their position at a company is about 4 years. Like if you look at it across the entire industry, the average time a rep has been in their position is less than 2. Yep. Right? So that the job duration, if you like, of the SE is twice that of the rep. So a lot of the customer knowledge and just the corporate gestalt of what's going on sits in the brain of the SE. So there's a lot to be said for having a constant contact between the SE and the customer where possible. And not just madly flipping them around every quarter or every 6 or 12 months, just because it might give you some better financial model or something like that.
Yeah, it's curious that most salespeople that I know are not millennials or Gen Z, whatever comes after millennials, and yet they move jobs every 2 years, and they're still not considered job hoppers. Why do you think they move jobs? I have my own theory, but I'd rather hear your thoughts.
It's the nature of the beast. I mean, this has been going on since the 80s. I mean, just the transient nature of salespeople in technology companies. Now you get some who go to work for one of the larger companies and they stick. And they're on the far end of the barbell. You get others who work somewhere 12, 18, 24 months, and they just pick up and leave somewhere else. And often that's because of a lack of stability, because their territory gets changed and their territory is made smaller, or now they can only sell half the portfolio stack. So normally reps get driven away by change. And actually, the percentage that get driven away by poor performance is less than those who get driven away by change.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of them get, because of the nature of quotas always going up. It's like every time a salesperson does their job and hits quota, they get punished by increasing their quota.
Yeah,
and which sometimes leads to like a lot of people just also exiting and going to another company. I've seen people just jump between competitors because they do something well here and now the quota is lower at the competitor. They go to the competitor, come back.
That'll happen. I mean, the whole quota setting issue, which is kind of outside the realm of sales engineering, I guess, I think needs some inspection as well. I read some report. I think Salesforce came out with a report last year that said only 61% of reps make their number. And that's a number that the sales ops bakes into the plan when they create all the quotas. So what kind of organization works where you only plan that 60% of your people are going to make their number? Why not make some change and do something different so maybe 90 or 100% of your people can make their number instead? Above my pay grade probably, but it's puzzled me for 35 years. So,
but it also affects sales engineers, especially those tied one-to-one, right?
Yes.
And that's a question that you would ask, like a new SE would ask, or someone moving to another company would ask, like, how often has my salesperson hit his quota or her quota? It's like 5 times out of 10 years. Maybe I should look elsewhere.
Yeah, so, an essential piece of discovery in the job interview process. Yes.
Is there one thing that you think has been the most positive change in terms of sales engineering from 8 years ago to now?
Oh, wow. The one thing question. One trend I love, I mean, thinking back to when I was an individual, contributor back in the day, right, where a 5 megabyte hard drive was gold. We had 300 board modems. When I were a lad, I think what's changed is like the automation and the technology that's coming into the job. I mean, the low end boring part of the job is disappearing. So, RFI, RFP responses, mostly automated. General quote, out of the box demos, mostly automated. POCs now, I have clients, you've got bots that monitor customer POCs and only notify the SEs if something's going wrong. So that whole automation, the application of technology to sales engineering, I think is fantastic. And that's only going to continue. I mean, I see a point where, maybe 2-3 years from now, there's going to be integration of, holograms, virtual technology. You're going to get live feeds, telling you what to say and what questions to ask. And, almost a bot. You hope your selling bot is better than their buying bot as a vendor. So, yeah.
On the opposite side, the negative side, what is one trend you're seeing that you think is pulling the SE profession down and we should look out
for? The dash to demo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still a newer trend that's happening right now.
It hasn't gone away. I believe, and I have some data from the clients to support this, that somewhere around 70-75% of demos that SEs do is too early in the sales cycle. And if you look at when the perfect if you look at the perfect transaction and when the demo occurs and map that to your average transaction, normally the demo is done like way too early. Now, yeah, you want to do like, vision generation demos and everything else, like Peter Cohan speaks about, and they have utility and they're great. But just doing again, we call it the dash to demo, just because you run out of ideas of doing everything else, that's not a great sales strategy. And I really wish that went away. Let's give them a demo.
Well, right now, like with the advent of consensus and Navitech and Walnut and all these, hopefully that will slow that down. At least, like, okay, get the customers interested in this a little bit.
Yeah. And that's another part of the low end of the job that's getting automated out, is those low end repeatable demos, and the amount of value that the companies like Consensus provide, which then companies like Vivint can measure over the top with all their dashboards. It's fantastic. So wow, I wish I had all this stuff when I was running an SE team years and years ago. Like, it would have made my life so much easier.
I have all this stuff. I just wish my company would buy some of it.
Well, yeah, that's true too.
That's another problem that SEs face. Like, all these companies provide so many good things for SEs, and yet they're all fighting for the same budget, and they're not even doing the same thing. Like, they're complementary to each other, but there's only enough budget for half of one software, I guess, and a lot of different companies. So hopefully that will be it. Like, well, when you do the 5th edition, hopefully that will be a trend that you see. That's a positive trend.
I hope so. I put something in the 4th edition foreshadowing it. I think a lot of spend on technology on the sales side is wasted, and the companies don't get their money's worth out of the technology they have and the processes that they use. And yeah, if you only took 10% of that and direct it to the SE organization, like, boy, I think that would make a major difference.
Yes, I agree with that 100%. So when is your book coming out? I mean, you just showed me a pile of paper, but hopefully.
Yeah, so the book will be hitting the streets. My publisher, Artec House, tells me it will come out towards the end of April.
Okay.
So we can put some links into the show notes that you have. Both my publisher and I believe Amazon in a few days will be giving some nice little pre-publication discounts on the book if you want to buy it early, and it will be available both as a hard copy book and also as a Kindle, as an ebook. So.
Nice. All right. Well, John, is there any questions you were hoping I was going to ask you, which I didn't?
Oh, yeah. So that's the famous discovery question, isn't it? Like, Don Carmichael likes that one. So what should I have asked you I didn't ask you? Not really. I mean, I'm just thrilled that the 4th edition is coming out there. I mean, there's been so much new to write about. It's fun doing all the research. It's fun working with some of my clients to do that research. The input I had from people who've read the book and everything else. So it's been a fun ride, and running the business at the same time. So,
I look forward to reading that book, John. If people want to reach out and connect with you, where can they do that?
They can do that through the website, so www.masteringtechnicalsales.com. You're also free to ping me on LinkedIn. You can find me, John Kerr, and then also on Twitter, John Kerr or Pre-Sales MTS. So either of those 3 mechanisms will work.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, John, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Okay. Yeah, look forward to it. All right. Thanks again, Ramsey. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, John, for coming on. Thank you for listening. The book, Mastering Technical Sales, 4th edition, is out now, and you can find it anywhere. There is a link to it on the show notes, wetheSalesEngineers.com/show221. You can find the link to that book there. Let me know what you think. Do you see what John sees? Like, are you on the same page? Do you disagree? Because it's fine to disagree. I know Chris White believes in the technical win, and he has his way of defining it, which works for him. And John, maybe not so much. So even 2 greats might disagree. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing or a wrong thing. It's actually good, because we get to have discussions and learn from them. If we take everything at face value, we will never learn, and we will never get better. So Don't forget the SE hotline, WeTheSalesEngineers.com. You can check out the hotline there. It's a service for you to help you in your journey, whatever your journey is. Obviously, it has to be related to sales engineering. So check it out. And if you have any questions, make sure to ask me those questions. I'd love to answer them. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for coming on, for listening. And I will see you next time.